Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is PAVE's 87th weekly virtual panel. And for the month of May, we've been looking at how AVs can help to serve the public good. And a lot of deployments we've looked at are in urban areas. So we wanted to focus on an effort in the state of Ohio. They've gotten a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to look at how this technology can be used in rural areas. So we have a fantastic group of panelists joining us today. We have Dr. Sarah Eldabaja from Ohio DOT District 10, Dr. Jay Wilhelm from Ohio University, and Dr. Joshua Every from Transportation Research Center Incorporated. Thank you all so much for being with us today. We will start with Dr. Eldabaja, and I think it might be helpful to just begin by looking at the big picture of the challenge that you're trying to tackle. I'm curious if you can provide an overview of this area in Ohio, kind of what the mobility and transportation challenges are, and what the work you're doing there.
Sure, absolutely. So thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone who's joining. So the region of Ohio that we're looking at is really rural Appalachian, southeastern Ohio. So we have a lot of rolling terrain, curvy roads, limited sight distance. And in fact, those kind of conditions often contribute to a lot of run off the road crashes that we see. But we also have typically narrow roadways, minimal shoulder, and we can have usually two-way, two-lane roadways. We do have some freeways, some interstate lookalikes, some interstates, but the majority of our roadway mileage are two-lane roadways. So that's kind of the driving environment. But as far as transportation challenges and mobility challenges go, we really lack transit options. So there aren't really a lot of options besides a personal car or knowing someone who has a personal car. So the ability to have a car and be able to drive that car is almost essential to survive, especially because things are really spread out. So if you want to get to services like healthcare, jobs, grocery stores, you really have to drive for quite a distance. If I'm thinking about the region that we're in specifically, shopping centers and hospitals can be about 30 minutes away from some locations, and more than that even. So it's really widespread, and like I said, the transportation network and ownership of a car is crucial.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then that kind of feeds right into the next question. Dr. Wilhelm, as I said at the beginning, we talk a lot about AVs in urban environments, and your proposal really looks at how this can serve rural communities, and curious about what the potential benefits are to those communities.
Sure, I can extend on what Sarah was saying. So we looked into how many people in general Southeast Ohio would need to travel 30, 40 minutes for, say, medical appointments. And they would have to, either borrow a car or have some family member or somebody they know drive them. And a lot of these people were missing their appointments because they couldn't make these things happen. So to me, the autonomous vehicles could really boost the lives, the well-being of people that don't have access in rural settings. Just like the urban area, I think, mass transit or taking the bus or subway is a good way to get to where you need. But in rural settings, we don't have those things, and it's sort of impractical to walk the distances because the terrain is difficult, or it's just not friendly, and even biking is really just not friendly in rural areas most of the time. So I think the whole focus of this was, what can we do to start the conversation for getting autonomous vehicles into rural areas? And show that if there is a business case for this, that these programs could grow, they need the data to say this is feasible, and if it's not feasible, what do we need to do to improve it?
Exactly. And then Dr. Every, so you all obviously received this ADS demonstration grant to look at how these technologies can assist with some of those challenges. Curious if you can just provide an overview of the project and what the goals are, how long it lasts.
Yeah, of course. And I think the prior answer teed that up quite well. The goal of the project is to generate data. That data can be used for regulatory purposes, for development of standards, and for development of systems and technologies. So it's a 4-year project. We're right about in year 2 right now, so we're near the middle of the term. And what we're doing to enable us to do that is actually deploying this technology, testing it both in controlled environment and then out on public roads. And we're doing that through a few different types. So one is a more passenger vehicle style deployment, using systems that allow us to get transparency into the software stack and capture both raw and some process data on what the system is perceiving, how it's seeing the world, and what challenges it's facing, as well as with trucking automation technology. So using trucking technologies that are both single vehicle automation and in platoons to also capture the unique challenges of these environments.
Exactly. And just want to expand on that a little bit. So as you said, there's both a trucking piece and a passenger vehicle piece. Dr. Al-Jabaja, I'm curious if you can, I want to look at the trucking project first. What are the challenges specifically that you're seeking to address, and how can automation assist there?
So I think that when we think about the trucking industry in general, there are usually 2 major concerns, and those are safety and economic viability. And so I think, from the safety side of things, automation aims to remove driver errors and improve reaction times. So the idea that the vehicle can react much quicker than the 2.5 or 3.5 second perception reaction time that we see with human drivers is expected to really bring a lot of safety improvements. But from the economic side of things too, you think about automation enables platooning, and platooning should be able to improve fuel efficiency, and theoretically those tight headways can also improve capacity, which in turn improves travel time. So you get to your destination quicker. You can turn around and come back and make more runs.
Okay, great. And actually, I wanted to also focus a little bit more on that. And Dr. Every, just curious, Dr. El-Dabaja mentioned platooning. Can you give, much of the audience probably already knows about this, but can you just talk a little bit about platooning, what it is, what the benefits are, and then also what the challenges are?
Yeah, of course, and I can expand on that a little bit. So, as I mentioned in the prior answer, what platooning allows you to reduce headway, which it has a net effect of reducing the overall aerodynamic drag that's on average experienced by the vehicle. So that can improve fuel economy. You also get into some challenges with that come with those benefits. That reduced headway we've seen can cause some regulatory questions to pop up in terms of overall safety of that system, interactions with law enforcement. How does a law enforcement officer that's approaching a platoon set of vehicles know from a distance that they are operating in a platoon and a driver is not violating the state required headway? So those are some of the things. There's also operational considerations. So if you're operating with vehicles in a platoon, that effectively doubles the length of a vehicle that's operating. How does that behave around rural environments where you may have shorter on-ramps, shorter entry and exit points, or even the potential for vehicles to cut in the middle of a platoon? And then how does that system respond to both extend the headway and then re-engage and rejoin the platoon?
That's interesting. And then Dr. Wilhelm, let's turn to the passenger vehicle program. Can you tell us what the goals of that are and how that program works?
The vision for the passenger side is to look at 10, 12, 15 person passenger vans. So these are a little bit bigger than normal road vehicles. And what does it take to enable automation for that size of a vehicle? And then how do those automation systems work? We're looking for what are our base requirements? Can we accommodate, say people that have a little trouble getting on and off the vehicle? And it's back to the whole, picking up people in rural environments, not just one person in the vehicle, but can we put multiple people to make the trip more efficient?
Interesting. And how does a person, how do they contact the vehicle, let them know they need a ride? How does it work from the passenger side?
We're not quite there to that part. It's more of proving out the technologies first. So when we're collecting data, we're always going to have a safety driver. We're always going to be running a handful of routes to see how they perform under different conditions. And then, the idea is really to transition this to the next step, which is somebody could take this on and form a business around it and start rolling these out.
Interesting. Okay. And then part of what I always love about these panels is, I always think of it as it takes a village concept, that all the public sector and the private sector and all these different partners that come together. And this project for sure involves a huge number of collaborators and partners. Dr. Aldabaja, I'm curious if you can just talk about the different categories of the organizations that have been involved and what their roles are and kind of how it's important to have all these different people coming together to build this program.
Yeah, so I think we've got a really great group of partners, academic, private, and public sector. And I think that, having so many different collaborators really brings a broad perspective and a lot of expertise to the project. Mm-hmm. And that really enables us to look at research questions from various points of view. So, the needs and objectives of a researcher in academia might be looking at the algorithms. How do we improve the algorithms, or how do we better design these systems for the human machine interactions that are going to take place? Mm-hmm. Whereas from the public sector, we might be more concerned with what do we need to do as infrastructure owner operators? What do we need to prepare for? How do we design? And what is traffic management going to look like in the future? So I think really bringing all of these partners together in this project is going to have great benefit to the outcomes.
Fantastic. And then Dr. Wilhelm, obviously a significant aspect of this project is data collection, which you've already made reference to. I'm curious if you can just elaborate on that a little bit. What kind of data are you collecting, and what will you do with that information?
Sure, I can say this from two perspectives. One is, the types of data is everything from the sensors. So we've got scanning LiDAR, at least 32 lasers, 2 cameras that look forward at slightly different positions, and a radar system in the front. So that's our raw data feed. And then we have information like GPS. We have dual antenna GPS for high precision. Mm-hmm. And that has inertial measurement. And all this information is put together so that the vehicle can sense where it is and what's around it. And that's the data that we're recording. And then inside of it, the autonomous software, is making decisions based on that data. So we're recording that too. Mm-hmm. And the final output of that is the system on or is it off? And what we want to know is when it turns off, why did it do that? So we need all of this data to be able to do that. So it's sort of like we're running a black box that an airplane would have all the time for hours at a time and collecting all of that data. And then when something happens, we go back and we look and try and recreate the scenario. So tons and tons of data. We're talking about, a half an hour is 100 or so gigabytes of data.
Wow. And Dr. Every, obviously you said you're 2 years into a 4-year project, but curious what you can say about the findings so far. What have you learned at this point?
I think one of the biggest things we have confirmed so far is we chose a pretty hard problem and one of the right problems to try to solve. The challenges that we've seen in getting systems to function robustly, and as Dr. Will mentioned, the disengagements that we're getting back from those systems as they're encountering those challenges are telling us we're on the right track. So I really think that one of the things that we're going to be able to take away from this is all the nuance in those different disengagements, as was mentioned. And as we're working to refine systems and working to address those disengagements, it almost becomes a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole, if you'll allow the analogy, that as you fine-tune one element, you see another element of performance potentially pop up, or you see one element degrade. And, as we look at this project as a whole with the goal of generating data, I think that's a fantastic finding, because it means that that next generation of problems is going to have that raw information it needs to really dive in and start addressing those for our community.
Absolutely. And Dr. Aldabaja, have there been similar studies to this? I assume as you all were putting this together that you looked at kind of what's been done in the past. I'm curious what those had found and sort of how this program is different than other things that have been studied.
So there have been previous deployments, both nationally and globally, that have looked into automated vehicle performance. But as you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of those are usually urban focused. So that's what's really unique about our project, is that it brings the focus back to rural areas, which, I mean, really the majority of lane miles comes from rural roadways. And there's a large population when you bring everyone together. There's a large population within rural communities. And so it's really unique to be looking at rural areas. But I will say that there is a sister project to this one in Iowa that is also rural focused and looking into human factors aspects of the automated vehicle deployments as well.
Yes, I believe it's probably the same project that at the University of Iowa. We did a panel about that earlier this year. They're doing fantastic work too. I'll give them a huge plug. And Dr. Wilhelm, one of the things that struck me when I was kind of looking at your project, we've done a few panels lately on ODD, and we've talked about how, all of the things that go into a operational design domain, which is geography and so many other pieces. But in terms of the geography, your domain is huge. And it seems like there'd be endless edge cases to think about. And I'm curious how you start to tackle that, how you account for all of those edge cases.
Sure, I think the edge cases keep me up at night. I just dealt with one today because we were out driving, collecting some data. And when the line markers were down, there was paint spilled in the middle of the road, yellow paint. So one of the systems that runs is optical looking for the lines on the road. And I thought that was neat, because I don't know how the system would interpret that sort of issue. But we're looking from going from, a 4-lane divided highway to a 2-lane to maybe an unmarked road. We go by gravel roads. We're using systems to pick up the road signs as well. And what if they're missing? What if the stop sign is missing? One of the things I noticed today was a 55-mile-per-hour road, 2-lane that had a tight turn that had a 25-mile-per-hour limit. So that's not something you see when you necessarily plan the route. These are extra things, like you said, edge cases. And what we're trying to do is have we have a safety driver for now that can disable it. But why was that disabled? What can we learn from the edge cases? Can we generalize them and bring them back into the system so that we can keep control over what's going on? And those edge cases, like I said, they keep you up at night, because it's what you don't know that you don't know that can get you in trouble. So we're trying to answer some of those questions with this work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a fascinating project you all have. And then Dr. Every, after this study is complete, I'm curious if you are thinking about next steps. What would be the next follow-up projects that you think would be valuable?
Yeah, I think part of running this type of project, where our goal is to optimize for data collection, you have to constantly be thinking about the next project, the next use case, what the next researcher is going to want to engage and get this information. So, we've talked a lot, and, we mentioned earlier in this about kind of the interaction with infrastructure and how that comes together. And that's, a very wide open field right now. And I think one of the prime examples where we can start kind of bringing this data together. And I think kind of taking it one step further to what really kind of inspired us to go down this path in the first place. Whether it be a system, whether it be a neural network, whether it be a vehicle, often the nature and the quality of development is directly reflective of, those known unknowns. or that training data that you have available. And one way to ensure that these cases are represented in that data set is to make sure that information is out there. Those challenges are at least, if not solved, they've been aired out, they've been brought to light, and that next round of researchers can solve them. So I think we're constantly evaluating that as we move through this work. And I think that continues to drive that mission of how do we make sure we're getting the best data set possible and motivating us to keep going in that direction.
Great. And either Dr. Aldabaja or Dr. Wilhelm, do either of you have follow-up projects? Anything to add to that? Okay. Yeah, it was a good answer. Next, wanted to go to a couple of audience questions we got. We always get really interesting questions from our viewers. And one was, as I said at the beginning, we've been looking at how AVs can help to serve the public good. And the question is, do you think that if autonomous vehicles are used for the public good first, will that increase acceptance and awareness and trust in the vehicles? Dr. Aldabaja, did you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, that is a really important point because deploying these systems successfully is really going to depend on garnering trust from the general public. And right now, most people do not have any intimate knowledge of automated vehicles or their functionality. And so a lot of what people are exposed to right now is what they see through media outlets. And so if we are able to bring that exposure kind of firsthand, we've actually noticed in some research cases that exposure to automated vehicle technologies, even if it's just one time, but that firsthand exposure can improve acceptance nearly twofold. So we can see like a doubling in acceptance just because they've been exposed to it. So if these automated vehicles are deployed starting out for public use and transit mobility services, then I think we will see more trust and more acceptance building, which in turn will push the deployments to occur quickly.
I think that's exactly right. And we talk about that a lot in PAVE, about how sort of the concept of an autonomous vehicle is so foreign to people. And when they can really see how this can impact their lives and how it can serve their communities and the real differences it can make in terms of, making communities more livable, I think really does kind of expand your mind about the potential of the technology. And then another question we got is about what should the federal government do to update or mandate uniformity in signage and new infrastructure construction to allow AVs to operate in more rural areas? Do any of you want to tackle that one? Dr. Every, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, of course. I think as we look at in this broader area, we often talk about as kind of infrastructure readiness for automation. So I think that is one of the primary areas where these data sets can be used. And the really interesting thing when you start getting into that class of problems is they're often a very practical set of questions. How does the system respond if it encounters this, even down to things such as wet retroreflective lane marker performance in perception of these systems and how they're able to recognize it. Often those questions you ask are very similar to what you'd ask for a human, but also in some cases they're dramatically different just due to the different sensor modalities that we're able to deploy with these technologies. So I think if there are any grad students that are listening along that are looking for a good topic, I'd be really excited to see a thesis or dissertation come out on some of this information, because there's a lot of value really to be added there as we continue to go down the road of bringing this technology to market.
Great.
Sarah, I can follow up on that.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing we did not talk about yet is how these vehicles rely on maps.
Mm-hmm.
And this is point cloud data that's been collected with the LiDAR, so we can localize from it, figure out where we are. And then this is lane marking maps. So a little bit higher detail than what you would see in Google Maps. That's highly referenced is localization accurate. And right now, we are getting our own maps of our routes that we've selected. We're using a third party to do that. GM and Ford have been mapping the interstates of the US. GM has their Super Cruise system, but nobody's really sharing this information. And one thing that the feds could do is make this available to anybody. And there were some questions about how good is it, but right now you basically have free access to things like Google Maps to plan your routes and guide silly humans driving vehicles. But the autonomous vehicles need those maps as well, and it's not really clear where that's going to come from or who's going to get access to it. So I think that's a big area beyond just signage and road markings, because should we let the autonomous vehicles just use what's available on the road to drive? That might not be enough information. So to me that's a big one, is the access to the maps.
Absolutely. No, that's really interesting. And then the last question I would love to hear from a couple of you, if you can, is I would say one of the most common questions we get whenever we do a panel like this talking about a specific project is other communities say, what advice do you have for us? And I know we have a lot of people in the audience who are from other, public sector entities. Do you have any advice, particularly for rural communities who are looking at doing this in terms of what partners you should bring together, or what things you should think about, kind of lessons learned? Do any of you have advice for others wanting to embark on a similar effort?
I can lead off on that one. The biggest bit of advice that I can provide to anyone who wants to understand how this technology is going to interact with their community is get your hands on it. If whatever level you can get, even if it's a level 1 ACC system, if you can get a level 2 lane tracking system, even that's just current commercial production, if you have to go rent it for a week, you can learn a lot just by driving your community and seeing the challenges that technology faces. I really don't believe there's any replacement for that. And that gives you some level of insight into the type of larger problems we're talking about as we talk about the higher levels of automation. But even things as simple as finding a few construction zones in your neighborhood, understanding how a system behaves when it disengages, understanding how it behaves when it encounters rain. You can learn so much so quickly that, I think literally if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a drive is worth 1,000 pictures. And I really think community leaders, by engaging with this technology, can gain that understanding and start to have the conversation around what's next.
Absolutely. And I want to add for the audience, a common topic we talk about in the panels is the testing that goes into it. When we were right before the panel began, Dr. Arvey was telling a story about how when they're testing the vehicles, that they're one of the few streets that's ever had to unplow a street to create a more snowy environment to test the vehicles. Fantastic. Anything else from anyone else to add about advice for other communities, or anything you'd add?
I would, one of the things that we will be doing is outreach, because we want to collect some information on perception of autonomous vehicles. Mm-hmm. So we will be doing outreach to at least 10 cities in Ohio. So with that comes, what will we going to demonstrate? We will take our autonomous vehicle, show people what it does in a very high level sense, because right now our system is, to enable it, you have to type some command line things. It's not as easy as clicking a button in the car. So we're not quite there yet that people could get one of these on their own. And I think one of the major partners that has enabled us to get this far is Autonomous Stuff. They're a company in Illinois, and this is their bread and butter, is really building the vehicles so that they enable us to do what we want to do.
Fantastic. And actually, I was curious about that, Dr. Aldabaj. I'm curious if you can, in terms of community outreach, have you all done much, efforts to kind of inform the community about what you're doing? I know, again, it's a huge area you're covering. Have you had much?
Yes, so public outreach is a very important aspect of this project. And I would say in general, to anyone who's planning to, deploy in their area, they need to think about how do we connect with stakeholders, the public in general, because we have to remember that humans are in fact still going to be part of this transportation network for quite a while. So we can't just remove them completely and forget about them. So we have done some public outreach, primarily with stakeholders in this region. So local officials, cities, emergency responders, infrastructure owner operators, because they also lend a lot of information to the planning process. You know, they're very intimately connected to this region, and they know things about it that we might not. They know locations that are prone to flooding. They know where deer hits are going to happen typically. And so these things that we wouldn't normally know are important. So community outreach is definitely needs to be a consideration.
For sure. Yeah, it's always a ongoing conversation. We are sadly out of time, but have loved this conversation with you all. Thank you, Dr. Joshua Every, Dr. Sarah Eldabaja, and Dr. Jay Wilhelm. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you to the audience. And we will, this will also be available on our podcast, the PAVE cast, and we will see you next time. Thank you.